Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right. We're talking about 1998's Disturbing Behavior on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal Patrick Hamilton coming to you once again from Cradle Bay. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we're dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. So we're going to unpack all the gory, well, not so gory details of disturbing behavior in the hopes that a high school student's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust to go to the yogurt shop with, the one, the only Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm great. How are you, Patrick?
I am excellent. I am about academic achievement. How about you?
I'm about service to my community.
It's about a community group that really helps one another. We never see them help one another, though.
They're not really doing much. They're just kind of standing around and grinning.
Yes, and occasionally locking the cafeteria doors to beat the shit out of somebody. I don't really know. It's not exactly the Boy Scouts. This isn't the Boys and Girls Club we're talking here.
No.
This is an interesting film, and I don't want to scare you, Gina, but we are not alone. That is right. We have a special guest. Now, you may know her as the co-host of The Sense at Prom and the co-writer of Sleepaway Camp, which has just been released by Die Books, the one, the only Harmony Colangelo. How are you doing today, Harmony?
Oh, I'm dandy. I got tea. I'm feeling delightful in a perfectly normal amount. So we're good to go.
So you don't need to be strapped to a chair and have a microchip zapped into your eyeball?
Not last I checked, but don't knock it till you try it.
Very, very true. This is an interesting motion picture that I kind of have a fondness for. I was very much an X-Files person. That just wormed its way into my brain, and I got X-File pilled, and I was just into it all. I liked Canadian locations. I liked layering. I was very into layering.
Mm-hmm.
And this film really displays all my passions in one place. Unfortunately, it's very compromised. So I guess my question to you, Harmony, and then obviously to you, Gina, when was the first time that you watched 1998's Disturbing Behavior?
That was probably like 5 or 6 years ago when my wife and I started getting together. We watched movies. We made a big old list, like probably 100 movies long on that list of like things we've got to watch together. Mm-hmm. And it was things that at least one of us hasn't seen. So it was us showing each other movies. My contribution to that list ended up being one movie because she has seen everything. And this was on her list because not only did she show me like real like extreme or weird or schlocky things just to be like, I just want to see if you can hang with my taste. Cause like, if you're not going to if you have like an adverse reaction to John Waters, I don't know if we're going to work as a couple.
Sure.
So in that, where there are also like flawed movies, like Disturbing Behavior, where it's like, okay, can you see through like the fog of this to see the movie that's actually in here? Or are you looking at it at face value? Cause that matters.
Yeah.
And it does. So that was probably it, probably some 6 years ago. So not super recently, but I've been around. I've seen it a few times since then.
Yeah. How about you, Gina?
Well, as I mentioned in the past, I was already an adult for several years by the time this movie came out.
Yes.
And I also was kind of in my, horror's just appealing to teenagers now. I guess I'm done with it. The long break of, not wanting to watch horror movies to me that seem to be more, style over substance.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see this in the theater. I waited till it came to cable. And in my mind's eye, I continuously conflate this with The Faculty.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A movie I did actually end up liking. I thought The Faculty was pretty good. So I always compared the two and found this one lacking. And and funny, you going back and reading the Wikipedia page, I was surprised to discover this did not actually do very well at the box office. I just assumed that all of them, like I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Faculty, all generally did pretty well. This one not so much. But
it got buried.
It was definitely outlived by not one but two songs that are included it, and we're both from that, again, another strange end of the 90s era of these this rash of one-hit wonders. Mm-hmm. So in this case it was Got You Where I Want You, which is a song playing during the opening scene. And then there's a song Flagpole Sitter, which was, I'm not sure if it's actually in the movie, but it
is.
Yeah. Okay, but it was definitely used in the trailer. Mm-hmm. And those both became big radio hits. So that's more like what my takeaway from the time when it was released is. This was only the second time I'd watched it for this.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters because I knew David Nutter was involved, and he was a major X-Files director, and actually has an astoundingly successful TV directing career. Mm-hmm. The one stat that really blew me away is he's directed 24 television pilots, and 21 of them were picked up to series. That kind of success rate is practically unheard of.
For real.
So he has a massive stamp on how we see television. He became a big HBO guy, oddly enough, like starting with Band of Brothers. So he's no slouch. But when he comes into this, he's viewed as a guy whose only movies are things like Tracers 5. So he's like, oh, you've done good television, pat on the head condescendingly, but we're going to give you a big boy chance to make a big boy movie. And so the script comes out of a guy who as I watched it this time, like, man, this dude really is smoking what Quentin Tarantino is bringing to the party. And then I look at his resume, like, oh, he wrote Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. He wanted to be Quentin Tarantino so bad. And so this movie is allowing him to let people monologue the fuck out. They have this script for this movie. They get Nutter. He brings in Mark Snow, who's the composer of the X-Files theme, to do the music. They go to a Vancouver location. There's a lot of X-Files there. Okay. And it's a variation on the theme. Obviously, MGM greenlit this, thinking we got ourselves another Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer on our hands. This is what the kids want. This is what the kids are going to get. And it's going to turn out fantastic. Nutter delivers a cut that's 115 minutes. So it's under 2 hours, but that's the long end of the cut. And they test it in Texas, and it fucking flatlines. And it's got unfinished effects. It's using a temp score, all the things that would tell you this probably isn't the finished version of this movie. And MGM immediately rips it out of his hands and cut it down to its current state, which is under 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you can tell all the interesting parts that weren't part of giant monologues have just been stripped from the movie. And I just think there's a good movie here that is just fucked with to death.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw that the original concept was sort of a dark satire of how young people were starting to be over-medicated for like perceived emotional problems, I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I wish that's what it turned out to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you want to really understand like how chopped up this movie is, like the best way that I can kind of encapsulate it in like maybe 20 seconds is the use of the song Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger, who's a band I actually quite like. They severely overlooked. It deserves a little more recognition than this one song, especially on their follow-up album to this. But they use that when they're escaping a mental institution, and The song doesn't really fit the tone at all, but that's fine. We're here to have a little bit more fun. The movie's not been super fun up to this point. They cut that song 4 times in maybe 20 seconds just to get the specific lyrics they want that pertain to where we are in the movie.
Yeah. Well, I think they saw the effect of the trailer and they really wanted to replicate it. They knew they wanted that "I'm not sick, but I'm not well" in there and have the end chung, 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 chug in that sequence. And you're kind of like, okay, but that's not how the song goes. And this isn't the feeling I should be having.
No.
She just punched out a mental patient.
Yes.
Which is
very
how you solve problems in this world.
Yeah, like the whole movie is so moody, and like this is, dorky indie rock. Like this is like putting a Ben Folds 5 song in here. Like it just doesn't quite work with the movie, but like I'm happy it's here. I think that if there was additional footage, probably would have fleshed it out and it would have been a fun runaway chase, maybe. I don't know. That feels like the larger issue with the movie as a whole if you were to just pluck 30 seconds from it.
Yeah. I think the thing that really gives a tell for me is that I'm sorry to bring this up, but this is the way the movie goes. Rachel, Katie Holmes, is sexually assaulted in a side room where the custodian keeps all his stuff. She escapes this after a rat turns on this subsonic rat disturber boombox, and her assaulter freaks out and she manages to escape. It is after this that her hair becomes washed. Up until this point, she said unwashed hair. After an assault, she's like, time to wash my hair. And I'm like, are you communicating character through shampooing her hair? Because why is she not more changed by this experience? The movie is not essentially about sexual assault. That being said, this is treated like an inconvenience. Like she asked for milk and was given chocolate milk by the lunch lady.
Maybe it's that thing that you see in a lot of movies where as soon as something bad happens, like an assault, someone goes and showers for a long time. And while she was there, she goes, well, while I'm here.
I've been avoiding this long enough. There is so much of this movie that has a core of an idea, and you can just feel the studio starting to strip it away. This isn't sleek enough. This isn't fast enough. It isn't cool enough. How do we make this more like these other movies that it isn't like? It's of a vein. There's no way you can't tell me you can't sell an X-Files-esque thing to kids and that they won't go see it in droves, because 2 years later, they did. It's called Final Destination. So it's not impossible. But because this movie has a little bit more on its mind, I just don't think anyone enjoyed the satire in motion, is my guess.
Probably. I think that this is just not the most tested genre for teens at this specific period in time, because I think they clearly wanted a Kevin Williamson movie, which is The Faculty is, and he would be quite successful with Rodriguez later in the year. But then I Know What You Did Last Summer, the scream, the snappy dialogue, the snarky little lines, that's what they prioritize in this. I think that they want to give it a little bit more sense of fun, which is why they have these, like, I don't know, the end of Night of the Creeps where like it's Miller Time-esque lines are inserted into this movie. Like that's the end of like every scene is a zinger. And I think that they just thought what they wanted out of a teen release, didn't get it, and then went, let's try to mold this into something that kids who like Scream can get, because it is a critique on culture. It is having Gavin with these long monologues about how everyone's a loser and a robot and has their little cliques in the lunchroom. And then that's critiquing high school, which feels like the critique of horror movie monologue that you get out of Jamie Kennedy. I think that's what they were hoping to achieve, which at that point is just completely mismarketing your movie and was doomed to fail.
Yeah.
It just, at its core, it has a very simple concept, and that for whatever reason, parents are always concerned that their children are turning out wrong. And how can I possibly steer them in the quote unquote right direction? If that, and you take that to the nth extreme of, I'm going to zap a microchip into your eyeball. And so what if whenever you get horny, you become homicidal? That's a problem. That is a R&D problem.
Yeah, that was kind of when I was like, okay, this is something they didn't consider in the creation of this chip that turns everybody into Wally Cleaver. Like nobody thought, like, well, maybe, what are teens? They're just, surging balls of hormones.
Right.
Well, should we take that into consideration with designing the ship? It'll be all right. It'll work itself out.
I think we aim more for aesthetics of how they all dress.
Yeah, it's really important that they wear like, Letterman sweaters and modest dress, and we don't have to worry. They'll never get to the point where what happens after all that's taken off.
At its core, the movie just doesn't have the courage of its convictions, because obviously there is the element of being medicated as a teenager and the worries about that. But ultimately, this movie it has an idea that if there are anything that a parent might consider wrong, or a child is headed in the wrong direction, or does not coincide with their personal beliefs, that this is the proper way to deal with it. And of course, it is in the aftermath of this that we start to hear about all the, pray the queer away camps that exist in the world, and these extreme measures that parents are taking to, rectify what they believe is broken, but is actually simply reality about their children. This is fertile ground, and other people have made more of it since. But I think the grand failing of the film is to not have the actual courage of its convictions, whether it was stripped away or whatnot. And you could start right away with what I think is the most telling thing, and that is, instead of casting James Marsden, whom I love his weird slide from, leading man to the world's most conventionally handsome character actor. That's great for him. But the person his brother who kills himself is played by Ethan Embry.
Yeah, that's what I said, where it's like, I did not buy James Marsden as the struggling younger brother who's constantly, living in the shadow of his dead, cool older brother, who was played by Ethan Embry. It's like, I don't know why you didn't consider just switching those roles.
Yes. And I think it would have done better as a result if they had.
And you where you said, the seed of a good idea is found in the fact that, one of the reasons that James Marsden's character, is considered, this is somebody we need to take to this program to straighten him out, is because he wants to talk about his dead brother, and the father's like, no, we're not talking about that. That's inappropriate. And it's like, it kind of more emphasizes it's the parents who are being very unreasonable and have very strange ideas of what quote unquote rebellious is.
Yes. Because apparently rebellious is wearing green. That's how it's communicated in the movie. If you are wearing earth tones, something's definitely wrong with you.
Rebellious is telling someone, I had a brother and he died. Yeah. It's like, because somehow, I guess, because he committed suicide, right? And I guess
yes.
And I guess that's the part you're not supposed to mention, which, I get that, but like, you can't even mention that he died. It's like, that's baffling to me.
That being said, I think it is baffling when you hear these parents who have this sort of magical thinking that you can strip your child of something that's inherently part of them. And instead of dealing with it on an emotional level where you're speaking about it, where it is an ongoing conversation, it's absolutely shut down. And then there's just an unset expectation for you to do what I want you to do, regardless of whether that's something as small as having a nose ring or something as large as I have a queer identity and I am not going to fit into whatever heteronormative role you have cast me in. And the movie just kind of squeaks by all that in the hopes that the sci-fi fun will just gloss over all that. And they cut James Marsden's big monologue about his older brother and why he chose to commit suicide. It cuts, Katie Holmes's big monologue about why she is the way she is and how she was hoping to get out of this town by graduating high school and going off to college. And now that won't happen. All that's cut away. All the character, all the motivation is stripped away in the hopes that the rails of the X-Files episode we're in will just carry the audience where it wants to go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what that's what the studio kind of, I think, they had an idea, obviously. As I said earlier, they clearly wanted to make a Kevin Williamson movie, and those movies live and die by their writing. And then they stripped away a lot of the writing of the movie, clearly. Yeah. And as a result, you get, Steven, as he doesn't like to be called, who is a nothing character. Like, he's our main character. This is essentially James Marsden's like big breakout role. He hadn't done a lot of movies yet. And we hadn't figured out as a society what to do with him yet. So you kind of get this dueling thing where at the same time he's doing X-Men and he's being Cyclops and being a stick in the mud, he then goes and does like Sugar and Spice. And you go, oh, you're a himbo. You should be being a himbo. And he eventually like fits into this role miraculously, wonderfully. He's the ultimate himbo, but the biggest movies he's in are X-Men. So we kind of don't know what to do with him for a while. Thinking about Ethan Embry, as much as I would love to see more of him, because I pop so hard every time he's in any movie, whether it's even like a small part, like Blind Spotting, where it's just like, oh yeah, you're in maybe 2 minutes of this actual movie, but I'm so happy you're here in the role you're in. Because Ethan Embry just pops off about politics on Twitter all the time because he's just rad. And I'm not sure he would work as like the disaffected brother as the lead either. Because at this point, all of his best known roles are like That Thing You Do or Empire Records or Can't Hardly Wait. Like, he is this doofy puppy dog of a teen boy. And I think I know he has it in him, but at this point, I don't know if we were confident enough to put him into those roles. As far as like the parents are concerned, though, there's a documentary out that we covered on our Patreon over at This Ends at Prom, where in the late 80s and into the 90s, there was this camp, and the doc is called Hell Camp. And it was this gradually increasing and unregulated thing that parents did with their kids when they didn't know what to do with them. Sometimes their kids were just like lazy and they're like, oh, my kid spends too much time watching TV. I don't know what to do with him. I'm going to send him to this camp, which is billed as like a life coach camp. It's going to help get them on the right track. And those kids were mixed up with kids who were like stealing and on heroin. And then they would have to go march through like 60 miles of desert for several months and then march back, and they were denied food and they were tortured. And eventually they shipped them off onto an island as like they got cracked down on in the United States. There was this supreme fear that we talk about a lot on our show where everything comes back to Reagan. Because that's the pleasantry. You want the Letterman jackets because you want the 1950s. Reagan was a throwback to, the America that we in our current times now have been trying to make great again, which never existed. It's this fantasy of, Woodsbury or whatever, where everyone whistles and says howdy to their neighbor. It's the Pleasantville of it all. So I can't help but feel like there's implications with the parents where they were either not communicative enough as parents. They were not, active enough parents that one of their kids, who was clearly like the damaged, fucked up one based on like the brief flashes we get in the actual movie, he, offs himself, and they then, of course, are going to blame themselves, and they don't have an answer for it, because if they had an answer, they could have prevented it in the first place. So that's why they're trying to pawn off fixing their kid on someone else, because so many of these parents didn't know what to do with these 90s disaffected teens who have a lot of confusing feelings about how they're not sick, but they're not well. And what does that mean?
How can I drum it out of them? I wholeheartedly agree with you. The potential, that's the thing that drives me crazy, is like the elements of this soup that they're making are fertile ground. You could really make something out of this. And then it becomes death by a thousand cuts, where you strip out all the character, you strip out all the moment about when people relate to one another. There's a giant scene where James Marsden goes into all the details of Ethan Embry's character dying and why that happened and how his parents reacted and why they moved to Cradle Bay. There's a giant scene that gets cut between Steve and Newberry, which fully explains why Newberry is the way he is and why he chose to do this. There's an entire scene that's cut between Steve and Officer Cox, played by Steve Railsback, that explain why that character is going along with all of this and seeding in, like, that Dr. Caldecott has wormed his way into this town and he has all the levers of power at his disposal. But at the same time, at one point, Chug literally goes Hulk on some people in a supermarket in front of dozens of people. At what point does the mystical sort of reputation of the Blue Ribbons come crashing down when women start disappearing and guys start flying through the air at a supermarket? That's something you can do when the movie has more of a comedic tone and the film keeps steering you away from it, but still showing you that stuff. And it becomes very disjointed as a result.
Yeah, I honestly, when you have this opening scene where a young lady has her neck snapped in the middle of performing a sexual act, like, I don't know how the audience is supposed to feel about that. Like, is the audience supposed to think that that's kind of funny, or is it? Because I mean, the dialogue before that is atrocious. It's just like when she calls him like fluid boy or something.
Well, he needs his fluids, Gina. Come on.
And she's like,
the boy needs his fluids.
She's like, self-mutilate this, and I'm like, I don't even know what to think of this dialogue. It's not good. And it's just like, I think that the audience is to think this is kind of funny. And like, okay, this girl disappears. We don't hear anything about it. It's
right.
Like,
she disappears off the planet and the parents are like, shit happens.
Right. It's like, clearly she is another student at the school because, like, not mentioned. It's a small town. You'd think that, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, is the idea is that, this has been going on for a while and people just quietly, acceded to it. Like, is this a thing? Like, remember in Patrick, when we talked about the Lost Boys and how, it was, pretty obvious that the entire town knew what was going on, but it was a few kids disappearing every now and then was, the price they were willing to pay to keep a town that was, kept the undesirables away, and again, this idea of these perfect teenagers, again, we don't see them really doing anything. They're just sort of standing around in like these sort of like Happy Days outfits.
Yeah. They're the Archie gang.
Right. Just kind of, smiling menacingly. And it's not like they're like working for the Kiwanis Club or, reading to senior citizens or holding bake sales or anything. It's like, okay, well, these just seem like a bunch of preppy assholes. And it's like, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I went to high school, a lot of times the preppy assholes were kind of the bad kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they weren't anybody was aspiring to be like. They weren't anybody that parents were pointing to and say, hey, you should be more like them.
I mean, I think that the coach and the cheerleaders is just the classic Americana of it all. Where you have football players, you have these good parts of American values that we like to instill as being like the leaders of our community. And in this movie, at least the way you see it, like they don't do anything other than be dicks, which jocks are traditionally known to be dicks. You learn all about that in, this monologue where Gavin says, we're not like all them. We're alternative. We listen to Harvester of Sorrow. I'm like, oh yeah, Metallica, that biggest band in the world, Metallica. but this is like 80s Metallica really they listened to before they cut their hair and sold out. And rather than like that stuff they're pumping out now and like load. But I think that this is like kind of not the movie Idle Hands, but the concept of Idle Hands where they're not doing anything, which means they're not getting into trouble. They have other things that are keeping them busy. And sometimes that's a whole lot of nothing. That's what a lobotomy is. That's what, over-medicating children is. Sometimes if they're not doing things, that can be viewed by some people as better than the wrong things. And some of these might be generous reads, but I'm like, I don't know. I think there is something to that idea, at least that's explored with what we happened to get. I think that, it's a fairly, I don't know. It's a well-worn trope that the jock is gonna be a dick. Like the 80s established that pretty well throughout their teen movies, but the 90s we were still pushing back on it because it was still a relevant thing, especially in like small town life where like sports take priority over everything else. Like the football team is what your town is the most proud of. That's what you funnel the most money into. There's something to there that I'm like, no, I'm like, I can see kind of what you're going for, but
it's kind of, it really goes unsaid. Like this is appearances only good behavior. Mm-hmm. And we literally only see them in two environments with the exception of one classroom scene is they're eating at the cafeteria or they're eating at the yogurt shop. Mm-hmm. That's it. Those are the places we see them en masse. They hold one sort of charity raffle fundraiser thing where they beat the shit out of a car straight out of a much better high school movie in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It seems like it's all there if you could just grab it and really use it and sort of make the most out of those elements. And for whatever reason, probably because it got cut to hell, all those moments are gone. That opening sequence, obviously, very much trying to ape the Casey sequence from Scream, being a cold open that really drops you into the action. But because, Nick Stahl's character witnesses 2 murders and he's like, well, that's a weird evening. Okay. You're making a different movie, y'all. Yeah, but I don't know that that's a cold open that's going to set the tone.
Yeah, but I mean, it does establish something in that, like, if the cops are involved and they're going to cover it up, then who's he going to go tell about it?
Right. True.
I just feel like that it would have been more jarring to have these teenagers who, went through this, mind control, I say forced into this mind control experiment, showing them doing stuff like, I don't know, playing with little children or, going to visit old people at a nursing home and just, being a good citizen. And then one little thing just triggers this like freak out. Mm-hmm. So, but like, of course someone like Chug, his name is Chug, and is going to turn out to, like I said, to Hulk out.
Roid like, rage. That's what it was.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's just like, okay, that's not surprising.
It really isn't. And this, I would just find that to be a problem that you can't just hide. Whereas, this one blue ribbon kid misfired on a lonely mountain road. Maybe we can cover that up. When the display is that massive, is that huge, I don't know how you're maintaining the cover that we got to bring more kids into the Blue Ribbon Gang because they behave so well. It undermines the actual super secret program that Caldecott has going on. So from that standpoint, if you're going to make it funny and a satire, you should go in that direction. That's what makes Scream work, is that it is both a slasher movie and a parody of slasher movies. And this film is not Stepford Wives and a parody of Stepford Wives. It kind of wants to have its cake in that it's a serious X-Files-esque sci-fi horror and has these moments that are just too outrageous to really work within that framework.
Well, one of the reasons I think the Stepford Wives work so well is because it's very much, satirizing, the rise of women's liberation and men's extreme fear of it, which, thank God we sorted that out.
And it never darkened our doorstep again.
Thank God that if you were to do a current remake of the Stepford Wives, people will think, oh, that's ridiculous. That would never happen. But I think one of the best and most unnerving aspects is how when these android duplicates of women malfunction it's so funny, but it's so creepy at the same time. Like you have, probably one of the, most memorable scenes is when Paula Prentice, who like Nick Stahl's character is sort of the first person who realizes there's something going on. And then eventually, she is changed into one as well. She's just like, she just keeps saying, I must get that recipe over and over again. And she's like trying to put like a cup on a on a counter and it keeps falling off. So she gets another one, puts the cup down, it keeps falling off. And it's just so weird and funny and creepy at the same time. And, it's so much more effective than what they're trying to do here. But I feel like the original concept of it was closer to that. So it's a little, it's a letdown as to what they end up ultimately going with.
Yeah. They don't quite know how to handle it. I think one of the more weirdly successful scenes, although I don't think it plays out the way they want it to, is when Steve comes home and Lorna Longley, the blonde that Nick Stahl is obsessed with, has been tutoring Steve's sister, Lindsay. And he's like, okay, I've had weird dealings with the Blue Ribbon Crew. Just please leave. And she gets super horned up by him drinking a Coke, as you do.
Yeah, it's like you didn't do a lot of testing of your product before you started installing it in these human beings. It's like Elon and his Neuralink chip, it's like well, in theory it would do this, so let's go ahead and try it without years and years and years of testing beforehand.
Well, that would require forethought and proper choices. So as I recall it, I think that this is in the movie. So when they go to that insane asylum, which is only maybe 5 minutes, and it feels like it should be much longer and much more pivotal than it is, like the thing that they learn there is that this doctor is his daughter is there. And I think the implication is that like he was experimenting on these methods, like whatever that might be, like, his therapy, his brainwashing, whatever. The implication seems to feel like it was built off of people there who already have things wrong with their brains. Like this is very much a cartoon iteration of what mental health and asylums look like, but it's people over flossing. It's people over brushing. It's people trying to do these like correct things that they're doing. And it feels like it's being drilled into them to the point of physically harming them. And when you have, we'll say spotty data for testing out your equipment, your hypothesis, your theories, you're going to get spotty results when you put it into anyone else. So it's like consistent through that whole thing. I don't know. I feel like this movie functions a lot in shorthand, maybe, And that's probably a lot of that's the editing, but also it's just a general understanding of like teen tropes where
Yes.
it does Chug freak out in the supermarket and is that weird? And does like the whole town essentially see it? Yes. But also we've seen time and time again that they're going to do anything to like that. Like, that's just one guy. He's had a bad time, but he's like, the team needs him. Or like, we're going to protect this one student in this small town. It happens a lot. And one little freak out like that, we can excuse that. That happens. A girl who's at home and was like tutoring or babysitting and there's no parents, like the trope there is that like, oh, well, clearly they're going to fool around because that's what kids do when parents aren't around. And that's why she gets so unbelievably horny and doesn't have to worry about saving her fluids because she's not playing in the big game, that she then has to crush her own head. I think I kind of get where they're going with this. It does not establish it well. I think it's operating under the assumption that you kind of just know this is how things are. And that could be the editing. That could be like, what the writing set forth. But I think that it understands teen tropes in an extremely 1998 edgy way of doing things that I don't know. I almost appreciate it. I think that it's real close to being something just at a core level there with its writing and its understanding of what this environment looks like.
For a movie that contains two sequences that border on rape,
Mm-hmm.
that is something we don't love to discuss on the show. But when that sequence in which Steve is attacked by Lorna could be interpreted by anyone walking into that situation that he has caused this situation and that is unremarked upon. It just, no one witnesses it. It's just unspoken of from that moment on. And it is haunting to me that it's just not explored in any way, shape, or form afterwards. It just occurs and then is unspoken of. And then she is just taken into the shop and they're like, all right, we got to scoop out her brains. At some point, Gina, we have to collect all of the weird, scientific or business plans that our villains have put together, the A plus B equals $, $, and try to work out the fucking math on this.
Yeah, it's like okay, do they fix them? Like,
Right.
do they just go to the parents and say, sorry, she malfunctioned?
Oopsie doodle.
Guess you should have just let her be herself,
Maybe she'll come back or maybe she's a ghost. Sorry. You win some, you lose
maybe
some. You can't make eggs without cracking some
totally.
shells.
I have to wonder if his scheme is actually a genius because he's blameless. I'm just thinking about this now. I'm just processing it right now. If someone fails the program, their parents thought they were already fucked up enough to just put them in the program in the first place. So it's like, we just couldn't save her. Like, she was too far gone. It almost feels like he's got like a bulletproof defense built in already for like why something might happen. Like now, as far as like what happens with them, it's like, they ran away or, they threw themselves into a ravine. I don't know what the excuse for them subtly disappearing is going to be. But as far as the failure is concerned, he's kind of got it worked out, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure the parents have to, sign a stack of releases.
Sure, yeah.
like making sure that he is held blameless if something happens. I mean, I would love to have to have done and now, obviously this may have had to include like a microfiche scene, which I wouldn't have minded that. But like,
that's what this needs.
of just like a rash of like missing teenagers
Right.
and like, who are just described as how they, we always knew this was of course they're going to run away. They're bad kids. And for just like this, unexplained disappearances of teenagers, that's implied either it's, more, failed experiments or the victims of failed experiments.
Well, it does go to show you like, they do discover that, Callicut's daughter is in that institution, but what would it have cost you to have some of the earlier characters who flame out that we see malfunction in small or big ways then are in a subsection of that same institution. And they're like, they put two and two together. They didn't run away. They're here. That would put a bitter bow on this, I feel. And the movie just didn't think of it at the time, didn't put two and two together, thought the more subtle way to go is the way to do it. I'm not sure what it is. They just thought that the layering of people's costumes was going to carry the day. I'm not sure. I love a good, half a sweater.
Sure. I mean, this is filmed in Canada. I feel like it's supposed to be maybe the Pacific Northwest. Like this is clearly supposed to be somewhere in America. And I don't know what part of America looks exactly like this, but it's rainy. It's cold up in the Pacific Northwest. You need lots of layers, even if some of them are barely there.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not complaining. I think the fashion is the high point of the movie.
Yeah.
If there was a way I wanted to dress in 1998, it was like Steve. But I lived in Los Angeles, and you can't layer like that. Maybe in January, but you'd melt into a fucking puddle if you dressed
100%. Honestly, I think the highlight of this movie for me might be William Sadler, who we haven't even talked about this whole time. Yeah. He's great. Like he's great in everything. He's got one of the most perplexing and fantastic filmographies of anybody ever. Cause just the range of like critically acclaimed and also kitschy, weird stuff like this and Bill and Ted, like that defines his career and he's the best. But I like him as a character. Quite frankly, I would have liked more of this to be sort of an element that's used where, you living in Los Angeles, you see this a lot where, say there's someone that's, I don't know, pooping on the street or something like that. Someone who is, an unhoused neighbor who probably has not all of their faculties about them. And people just don't look at them and ignore them because it's easier because you don't have to face any kind of reality of, you being a bad person by acknowledging it and then doing nothing. You just pretend you didn't see it. There is a certain freedom to this character that comes with people wanting to ignore you, people not wanting to deal with you because they think you're just a little crazy, you're a little not there. And that gives him a lot of freedom. I want to know what this character's backstory is. How long has he been doing this? How long has he known? How long has he been working like as this sort of is agent, the secret agent within the school to try to undo all of this? I am fascinated by this guy's story.
Yeah. And there is a longer deleted scene from the movie. If you have the old DVD, and I think they ported it over to the Blu-ray. I have the old DVD, where he basically goes into his backstory. But in an effort to cut this down below 90 minutes for whatever reason, they cut that off, which really is what bonds Steve and Newberry together as characters. So at the end of the movie, when Newberry sacrifices himself, it's not just, well, I got shot, so what the hell? It's like there's a connecting factor between the two characters. Why he would come to save the day at any point is explained. And they're like, we don't need that. Actually, you do. It really does help the movie when characters have motivations and you understand why they are the way they are.
Especially if this is the only adult that you have that is actually looking out for you because your parents aren't doing it. Like they are just pawning their problem, which is you, off onto someone else. Obviously, like the faculty has their own issues where they're not looking out for you. Like studies have shown that any teen or child growing up who has one other adult figure that they can like talk to or confide in that isn't a relative are like it's like a 50 or like an 80% improvement in like their health and their success rate. Like it's an astronomical rise. This is such like an important part of this dynamic, and I would have loved to have seen way more of it. Again, the parts. It's always the parts are there, but then they're not there anymore. They took them away.
It's stripped out. All that character just gets eradicated. I don't know that it needed to be 115 minutes, but if this had been a 105 and had those sequences in there where characters were allowed to explain themselves. I think it would have really helped reinforce the movie and probably would have grown more of a cult following. I don't know if it would have helped on impact. People obviously just kind of like another one of those, and they walked right by. And they said, I'll wait until December when the faculty comes out for that. Another fascinating movie that and how it deals with queerness is truly one for the record books. But I think ultimately more successful.
Easily.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They view your appreciation of grunge music as, we got to get it out of that person. We got to strip that out of somebody. Like, that is not a genuine concern. We are 1 year away from Kid Rock. That's a bigger problem.
I was going to say, especially in 1998.
Like grunge was done. Like grunge had pretty much like stopped in like 94, 95. By this point, this is we're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks era of music, where you have the swing revival and the ska revival and, you know, the Latin music explosion in America and the whatever things that we happen to all get for like fleeting moments of 6 to 8 months in the late 90s that I love. It's like the best time to have came up listening to music, because you got introduced to so much weird stuff where on one hand you're listening to Korn, but you're also listening to Squirrel Nut Zipper.
Right. It is the finest moment of the monoculture, where MTV harnesses everyone into determining what music is to listen to. And they're all, you know, dialing into a 1-800 number to make that happen. And then it just starts to sour a little bit towards the end. And then, of course, what ruins music is 2 airplanes go into buildings.
Yeah.
Sorry to say it, everybody. Y2K was supposed to happen and the world was supposed to crash. And then when it didn't happen, people went fucking insane. It's sort of what happened in the last 3 years, honestly, is you have this near miss, and as a result, people lose their fucking minds. That's my pet theory, everybody. Anyways.
But I mean, as far as world events are concerned, like, it's fascinating to see a student just talk about how they want to shoot up like everyone in the school and kill their parents and stuff like that in a movie the year before Columbine happens. This is one of those things where I always misremember what year that was. I always think it's 97 for some reason. It's not. It's 99, because that's when Eminem was writing songs about how he and Marilyn Manson were getting blamed for it. But
yeah,
it's so strange to see something get cut, because in my mind, it's like, oh, well, clearly this world event happened and then we had to cut around it. And it's not. They just decided to have that be a factor as like a very real looming threat of, you know, the 90s school shooter. And in this movie, he's justified, but then we just remove that element away before it would become too real. And that would have made this movie seem especially strange in hindsight.
Yeah. Here's another weird confluence of events that I think should be mentioned. There's a lot of movies that obviously influence what would become Mean Girls.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't remember how much this movie is a motivating factor behind Mean Girls, including the grand cafeteria talk about all the different sub-cliques within the high school. It is a near direct lift from this movie to Mean Girls. And I was like, oh, wow. I did not put 2 and 2 together. And then the clincher is that they give poor Katie Holmes all of these little verbal quirks where she tries out sounds razor. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, ooh, someone's trying to make fetch happen.
Honestly, I think that you can draw that line between a lot of things and Mean Girls. Like, it's definitely a 1-to-1, but this is such a well-worn trope in things. You have this in 10 Things I Hate About You. You have this in DJ Qualls' The New Guy, where they just explain all of the weird clicks. Weirdly enough, always a lot of cowboys. Like, a lot of cowboys in environments that don't have cowboys. I think the boom of country music in the 90s, where like Garth Brooks brought it to stadiums, is usually responsible for that. But yeah, this is just a thing that happens as a bit of world building for the new kid in town, you know?
Yeah. My favorite of her verbal quirks is who put the acid in my spam, which I absolutely will start using starting tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a little it reminded me of like Juno and Jennifer's Body, how they kind of had their own made up slang for like in universe.
Oh, for sure.
I would call those infinitely more successful.
Oh yeah, sure. But I'd like it's similar in that regard.
Oh yeah. The Diablo Cody, the Diablo Codyisms of it all are something we have a lot of fondness for on our show, because so much of the dialogue you get for teens is so specific and so dated that oftentimes by the time the movie comes out, kids aren't even saying that anymore. So her just making up words that aren't at all real kind of gives it a more timeless feel to it. You see this a lot with Gen Alpha right now, like these 14-year-olds and under, I believe. And they're using all of these words like phantom tax and skibbity and gyat, and all of these words that are nonsensical internet slang, which is what we've been doing forever. But it's you have to understand like multiple layers of language evolving, and had to have followed an exact Twitch streamer who mostly screens for like 12-year-olds in order to understand the weird references they're making. I am obsessed with teen culture and their evolution of language. It is so weird and so specific, and I love it when movies do odd choices like this, because they're not only are they memorable, but it feels so much more authentic than just saying something that will then be horribly dated.
True. Very true. I did find it somewhat telling that when Steve gets beaten up by the blue ribbons, they don't have the courage to actually mar his face. They're like, this is too beautiful. We have to keep this preserved. It's just, I mean, he shows up in this movie, and I wrote down Captain America, but ultimately he looks like Cyclops. He looks like he has to shave twice a day. So he doesn't communicate high school.
No, he was like 27 when he made this movie. So
he just looks so much older than absolutely everyone else that it's hard to take him seriously in the role. I don't know that it's a real knock on him. It's just a matter of
I mean, one of the things that we dig into a lot is actors playing characters that they are much too old to play.
True.
I mean, that's a staple of slasher movies.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's ever since like the evolution of teen movies in the 80s, that's just kind of what happens. Going all the way back to Grease in the 70s, like it's really just an element of what you can then do if they're older, because they might have more acting experience is brought up, but really it comes down to we can put them in more violent and sexual situations and work longer hours because we don't have to worry about real teens in this role having more rights because they're minors.
But there's one of those T-birds in Greece.
He's like 38.
That looks like he's a World War II vet.
Oh yeah. And
it's like he's been given a GI Bill and somehow he's back in high school. The man is well into his 30s. Of course, Grease wears it better because it's not pretending to be reality. I think it whenever you get closer and closer to reality, that's when things start.
Well, yeah, I mean, even during this era, you have what is it, James Vanderbeek and Dawson's Creek. I think by the end of that show, he was like pushing 40.
But he could really make his jaw quiver when he cried. So it ended up making sense. Is there anything? I feel like I have a grand fondness for the movie in that its attempt to do something, even though it's unsuccessful. But I have a warm spot for it in my heart.
Yeah, I think that again, I would have loved to have seen the original concept for it put to the screen, because again, when you have like this is in the post, and I've been focusing a lot about this on the book that I'm working on. You have the post Prozac Nation era, where all of a sudden, young people are being heavily medicated on, for having the audacity to express that they're feeling sad or they're feeling dissatisfied with their lives, which is something that adults have traditionally failed to understand, because we have convinced ourselves that your teenage years should be the best years of your life.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of the most depressing thing I've ever heard. But nevertheless, we definitely have this attitude of, if a teenager is depressed, well, what do you have to be depressed about? You have your whole life.
You don't pay taxes.
Right.
Right. It's like, what do you have to be so sad about? And it's like, well, a lot of times they don't know. That's how depression works, is, a lot of times you are sad and you don't know why. So I do, I think that was definitely a deep well to dip from for both social satire and horror. And I am unsurprised that test audiences fail to recognize the potential in that, because test audiences traditionally make the worst possible decisions and lead to the worst possible changes in movies, such as Fatal Attraction, Pretty in Pink, disturbing behavior. So, and yet,
rack them up.
Right. So and yet studios continue to rely on, an audience opinion, assuming that, well, they didn't like it, so this must be right.
You just got to learn that, like, they don't understand how to interpret data. Like, you can get data from them. It's like, cool. Why don't they like it? Oh, well, I took, bottoms or something, and we did test screens in Wisconsin. And I'm like, oh yeah, so rural Wisconsinites might not like this, like, queer coming of age comedy about girls. I can't imagine why that would play weird there.
Right, exactly. And all they see is, oop, this got a lot of negative feedback. Better make some massive changes on it. And they always make the worst possible decision.
It's astounding. It seems, well, there's a real issue here in Hollywood, and that is no one loves the smell of fear. And this, as soon as fear gets introduced into any creative effort, people start making decisions based out of that mindset, and it never goes well. It always turns out badly. And you can just smell the fear here from MGM that they've wasted $15 million they're never going to get back. But they knew they were going to get it back, because this was at a time where you could sell DVDs. There were active video stores, like, that existed, and you were going to get your money back on this. Just let the movie be the best version of what it is. And yes, you could obviously improve it in certain ways, but chucking the entire thing out and hoping that its under 90-minute run will alleviate all the problems is just asinine in my estimation.
I mean, you already wasted the money shooting it. So
Exactly.
if you threw that money away on stuff you're not using now.
On potential alone, I thought it was okay. I just think that the end result is very lacking.
I think the ultimate crime is that Dangerous Minds ending, which was not shot by the director. That is, it takes a real right-wing turn at the end there, where it's like, oh, you thought it was bad with white people. Wait till it happens with dun 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 minorities.
This is the evil version of, like, Stand and Deliver.
Yeah.
Where, I don't know, it's the white savior of it all. And it's like, cool, well, what is the white savior's values in this setting?
Have you guys done The Principal yet on this end?
We have not.
Oh,
boy.
My God. Wow. Wait till you get a load of that.
All right.
Oh, shit. That is some right-wingers' ultimate fucking fantasy. Like, you can practically hear them fapping in the background.
Gross.
It is terrible on a monumental level. I cannot wait to tune into that one. Of course, we can't tune into other podcasts until we choose your own death venture, and that's where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this film, disturbing behavior. If you were forced to die in one of those ways, which one would you choose and why? Up for bid, we have neck broken during blowjob, shot in the chest, stabbed in the stomach with part of a chair, bashed in the head with a pipe, get shot, drive off cliff, or just be driven off a cliff while you're holding your hands up to your ears and screaming, or get kicked in the face and fall to your death. And Harmony, you're our guest. That means you get to go first.
God, you know, if it was just slightly different, I would love to get my head crushed while, you know, performing oral sex like it's GoldenEye. That would be the ideal situation, but as that is not the unique circumstances of this movie, I would love to be the first of two movies that makes another brick in a wall reference and drive myself off of a cliff.
I mean, there are interesting choices here. I don't think there's a lot of lingering things. Like we're often given choices where like, oh, you would hurt for a really long time. And all the deaths in this movie are pretty sudden. Gina, what say you?
Yeah, the kills in this were underwhelming. So I'm probably going to have to say I too would want to go out the hero's way and just, you know, take a header off a cliff, you know, in a truck. So that's all right. I'll take that.
Yeah. I don't like heights, so I'm not taking that direction. I do not want it. I don't like enclosed spaces, and I do not like big things. So I'm honestly just getting shot in the chest. I'm taking the idiot's way out. I have nothing to do with this. My character has no name, and I'm simply dispatched, and I disappear, and no one wonders, where's Deputy Dipshit?
Yeah, Deputy Dipshit does not have a wife and children, apparently. You know, or maybe they just killed them too. You know, I mean,
he died in the line of duty, so they can remember him a hero.
We can't explain the circumstances of how he died a hero. Just trust us.
If that isn't the most police work thing, it was like, oh no, he died during a routine training exercise.
I mean, true. And again, I would love to see, you know, a version of this done now. You know, where you do have more of an overt reflection of, you know, the quote unquote problems of today's teens. You know, where I think it is definitely right to redo it and not focus so much, not worry so much on, you know, well, what if the audience doesn't get what we're trying to say? Don't worry about those audience members. Enough people will get what you're trying to say.
But Gina, it's not like we live in a world where people are just slamming unregulated microchips into brains.
I've never heard
and they
of
also
such
happen
a
to
thing.
own fucking Twitter.
You know, I've never heard of people, you know, talking about their children as if they are dead when they are not in fact dead.
Yeah. Again, so someone could give all three of us $15 million right now. We could make this happen between the three of us. Yes. I believe in our potential.
I already know that
Absolutely.
This is the my wife, if she could ever remake a horror movie, this is her choice. This is the one she would want to remake.
And she would do a damn good job.
She'd be wonderful. Like, she's so talented and perfect, and I love her. Also, I think that this movie could, frankly, I don't like that we make so many things into TV shows, but I think this could be beneficial. Have this be a limited run series.
It could,
yeah.
It could,
like 6 episodes.
I would love to. It's right. It needs backstory. It needs backstory about Caldecott. It needs backstory about the town. It needs, it needs more.
Yeah. And maybe one day we will get more, but sadly, what we can get more of right now is plugs. Harmony, can you tell everyone where people can see, read, hear more from you out there in the World Wide Web?
Oh yeah, I'm on the internet. I'm around Twitter and Instagram at Velocitraptor, Veloci_trap_tour. If you want to hear me more, talk a lot more about teen movies, as it is kind of the thing that we're known to do over on This Ends at Prom. We discuss mostly movies that I've never seen before. I have seen this one before, so I had that going for me this week. But it's movies that my wife grew up loving mostly, movies that she, has watched recent teen releases. And then I, with no experience in them, see how they hold up, having never grown up as a teen girl and really looking at them quite, in a different light. And we get wonderful discussions about gender, sexuality, and just what it means to be a teen and how it's really hard and you have a lot of feelings and don't know what to do with them. And we also have our book where we wrote about the history, the reappraisal, the reappraisal, and where sleepaway camp sits in the current zeitgeist of the world, socially, politically, in terms of fandom and its cult status. It's called Sleepaway Camp, and it's on Die Books.
Excellent work. I can't recommend This Ends at Prom enough. I've told BJ herself, and I'll tell you, I think it's fantastic work that everyone should be checking out. And Gina has Sleepaway Camp. Mine's on order. Can't wait to read it. We've avoided it here simply because I feel like we didn't have something specific to say about it. And I'm glad that you two do. That's excellent. I think much smarter minds at work than at least what I can.
Thank you.
Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
I write about television and movies at my Substack, GinaWatchesThings.substack.com. And I am on most social medias under Gina Does Things.
Do it today, people. Check it out. We have a Patreon where we have excellent bonus episodes, lots of extra things for you to check out, 3 episodes a month. And of course, you can find us on various, social networks. And for artwork, go to joshhollis.com. For this theme and other remixes, go to revengebodymemphis@bandcamp.com. Don't worry, folks. The body count will continue for myself, for Harmony, and for Gina. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.